Hey, welcome, and thank you for listening or watching the Focus Forward Business Podcast. I am Sturdy McKee, a business coach and advisor, and your host for the podcast. Today, I'm very pleased to bring you Heather Deveaux, founder of Heather Deveaux Instructional Design, where she follows the Think Big, Move Fast mantra in helping people create online courses, from mapping out the structure and curriculum to navigating the tech with ease. So, Heather, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Sturdy, for having me. This is exciting.
Cool. Great. Thanks. So will you tell listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Heather, like you said, and I'm actually based on the east coast of Canada. So I live in a little island called Cape Breton Island. It is near and dear to my heart. And for about 10 years, I didn't live here. I lived in the big city, the big scary city, but I'm a hometown girl. And so I was very excited when I got to come home several years ago. But the reason that that is important is because it is such a big part of my business now, working in small town rural, working with other small town rural entrepreneurs. And I work with big city people too. But my clientele tend to be solo entrepreneurs. They tend to be experienced business owners, or they run small teams. And because I'm on the East Coast, I think I tend to be much more accessible to people who are especially on the East Coast of Canada. But I really work hard to help, like I said, solo entrepreneurs or experienced entrepreneurs of lots of shapes and sizes, help them create online courses. And my shtick sort of is that I help them do it very, very quickly. I take all the drama out of it. And I'm not the kind of coach who asks questions. I'm the kind of coach who provides answers. So my approach is much different than a lot of business coaches who will take the time to sort of dig into why that is happening or how you feel about that. It's been my experience that there's a lot of that in the industry and it's very much needed, but that's not where I can shine and that's not where I can do my best work. And so I'm very practical, tactical, and I provide applicable information to business owners to be able to create courses so that they can just get it done already and start getting paid.
Great. So is the Heather Deveaux Instructional Design, is that your first business? And how did you
No,
get
it's not.
started? Okay.
Yeah, so it's iteration, I think, 4 of an
Okay.
existing. It's been the same business all along. It's just me and whatever corner of the industry I'm tackling at the time. But I have been a full-time entrepreneur for 5 years now. It is most certainly not my first business, but it is probably the one that is actually making the most impact. Given the times we live in with COVID and all that kind of stuff, I finally sort of found my niche or my niche. I like to say target market because I don't actually know how to say that word. So I just say I found my target market. This is where I'm going. That's where the money is. That's where I can make the most impact. So my business 5 years ago started from a direct response to losing my job. I had a wonderful opportunity that I was given and was entrusted with a lot of responsibility, working at a private career college here in Nova Scotia. And it just didn't stay afloat. We ended up closing the school. I took over as executive director, ended up having to close the school for a lack of funds. And it really destroyed me. Like, if I'm going to be frank, and I don't know how to be any other way but frank. So it really destroyed my sense of trust in
Sure.
giving my services to bosses, basically. But the other side of that story is I had 20 years of just quitting 20 jobs. I've actually had 20 jobs. I'm not that old, so that's a lot of jobs to have. But at the same time, I also had 20 businesses. So I have been a budding entrepreneur for the last 20 years, just trying to figure it out, trying to figure out where am I going? What am I doing? I probably could have used a business coach about 10 years ago when I was really dabbling pretty hard. Every 6 weeks, I was doing something else, quitting a job, looking for something else. But the one thing that remained the same was that no matter what my job was, no matter what the business was that I was trying to get up and go with, instructional design was part of it. So I've always been teaching, I've always been creating curriculum, I've always been developing online workshops for people. I've delivered thousands of hours of college and university curriculum. I've done private, government, social enterprise, nonprofit. It's just this thing that I've always loved to do. And I learned to do it when I worked in the Army. That's where my skill set actually comes from. And I worked on it for 20 years. And so whether I was working as an executive director, or I was working as a secretary, or I was actually working as an instructor, there was always a component of how do I turn this into something I can teach to people? So in 2013, I went back to school to get my master's in adult education. This is the same summer I moved back home to my hometown. So it was just wild and crazy. And that was really when I discovered that there was a field here and that there was a way that I could be helping people just, sort of beyond the basics of business. Because every business I've ever started has been a B2B. It's been not just selling to customers, but how do I get into the business world and stay there, in a really significant way. So in 2017, when I lost my job, I said, to hell with this. And I said, if I could show up and work half as hard as I did for this guy that I was working for, my businesses would have been wildly successful. But you give to others much more than you give to yourself, right? So that was really the nail in the coffin that did it for me. And I quit my job. I bought one of those cakes that was like F you, and I was done. And I started a business the very next day, and that was 5 years ago. So I made my own way pretty quickly when I realized that I just couldn't be an employee anymore. And I'm really driven by spite that way. I like to prove people, like to say to people like, oh, you don't think I can do it? Let me just show you how I'll do it 10 times and I'll do it way better than you think I can. But I was doing it for other people. I always showed up and performed for other people. And I think a lot of that is youth and ignorance, and you just don't realize what it takes to build a business. And so I started as a freelancer. 5 years ago, I jumped right into it. My very first project was actually writing a course for a client of mine who lives in Georgia. I still do work for him 5 years later. We're still connected really well. And that blossomed into a online school where I was teaching others to be a freelancer. I picked it up very quickly, was making six figures very quickly, and realized my instructor brain was constantly saying, you've got to turn this into something to teach to people. So I did some research and realized that there wasn't a whole lot of targeted material that took you out of the freelancing part of it and taught you how to run a freelancing business. So I wasn't teaching writing. I definitely wasn't teaching grammar. I was teaching you how do you get the back end of it up and running? How do you build that foundation for those 20 years of not knowing what the hell I was doing? How could I give that information to people so they could just get results very quickly? So that was very successful. I actually ended up selling that school. I ended up selling my major program in a licensing agreement. And so that funded my next sort of venture, which flopped terribly. So I ended up going full-time into business coaching. I'm just not suited for it, if I'm being honest. I just don't like excuses. I don't, it's ironic that we had to reschedule this twice because generally I am very on point. I'm very organized. I don't like excuses. I don't like when things aren't organized. And so for me, that was just a lot of people whining, and I'm not suited for that kind of work. So I have empathy for them and I have the tools to help them, but I'm kind of a kick-ass person. So if you want a kick in the butt, you come and see me. If you want a shoulder to cry on, I'm not the person to talk to. So I very quickly realized that I couldn't help people that way. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, my business just tanked. And I was at the point, I think I was burnt out a little bit too, because I had been hustling pretty hard for 4 years at that time. Right. When COVID hit, it really made me sit down and think about, okay, it's not about, are you doing this for real anymore? It's about what you're doing for real. And where is the skill set that you have that can make the kind of impact that you have been talking about making for years? You sort of stumbled into freelancing. It was quick and easy. There was no learning curve with that. And I think I discounted it a lot because it came easy to me. And so does instructional design. And for years off the end of my desk, I have done, tens of thousands of hours of content creation for courses, but it was never the thing that I took very seriously. And I have a master's degree in adult education, and I'm a certified tutor and instructor, and I'm an instructor trainer and a train the trainer, and all this stuff that I just was like, oh, that's just a thing I do. No, I want to run this other crazy business where I listen to people whine all day. I don't know where that came from. So when COVID hit last year, all of that is to say, I'm also very long-winded, by the way. All of that is to say, when COVID hit last year, it came time to put a stake in the ground.
Mhm.
And I had to do it in such a way that, I basically had to lean on the confidence in the experience I had. I couldn't mess around. There was no time for learning curves. So I went in the direction I knew best and realized very quickly I should have been doing that all along. But I think a little part of me was afraid of it because it's so easy. When things are easy, you think nobody's going to pay for that. Or you think you couldn't charge what you really want because it only takes you a fraction of the time it takes everybody else. And so I went and I took this course, and the course was not at all what I thought it was going to be. And I ended up spending almost $30,000 like American. And I was just like blown away by the poor quality of this program and what it was sold to be versus what it was actually when you get in there.
Right.
So that was really the first sort of, rock in my shoe about there's got to be a standard here. There's no standard. There's no industry regulation for this kind of stuff.
Right.
I'm a regulation kind of girl. So I was like, had it in the top of my mind that maybe there's something I could be doing here. So that was sort of the first thing. The second thing was when that flopped and I had invested a large amount of money into my business that turned out to not be worth investing.
Mhm.
I took another $5,000 out of my pocket and invested it in another program where I confirmed my assumptions about, okay, I have to pivot my business, got to stop coaching, have to go in this direction. And that's when Heather Deveaux Instructional Design was born. So it cost me $40,000 American to figure that out. But what I want to say about that, because I know that scares a lot of people, especially if they're just starting out, that you have time or you have money, but you generally don't always have both when you're running a business.
Right.
And so spending that money saved me 6 months of trying to figure that out, to try to sit around and find the answers for myself. So where I'm at now, if I had it over again, I would have spent that money over and over and over again. Knowing what I know now and how quickly it got me to where I am, even though the training was totally bogus, it was not worth the money I spent. Spending the money in that moment put me where I'm at today. So Heather Deveaux Instructional Design formally is only 7 months old, but I've been doing it off the end of my desk for 20 years already.
Well, I love that you've figured out, that common thread through all the different things that you've done.
Yeah.
And then, and I think that's a great point as well, that you bring up about not necessarily putting the right value on it when it's something that comes naturally to us.
Yeah.
Right. I was talking with a client this morning about that very thing, about,
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities. I mean, if you do something really well and that's what you excel at, you think it's natural. I think we tend to project, right? So we think it's
Totally.
natural and it's easy for everybody else. And why would anybody pay me to do that? Meanwhile, they're sitting there looking desperately for somebody who is good at that thing, because think of all those things that we're not good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we want to
Totally.
hire good people to do those things to help
Right.
us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great take home just right there. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about what you literally do for clients. What do you do for your folks?
Yeah. So I do two things, and that's it, which is also, if you could take away another piece of advice, is get real clear on what you do. It'll save you a lot of time. It'll make you a lot of money. So I do two things. One is I have a DIY solution for entrepreneurs who want to learn to create online courses by themselves. It's a 30-day program. And basically, when you come into my program, you do very small chunkets of projects, of activities in 30-day increments. You build on your sort of skill set and assets for your online courses one day at a time. At the end of 30 days, you have a fully finished, ready to sell online course. And it sounds like pie in the sky, but I've had lots of people go through it. They've all created courses. They're all selling their courses. And every time somebody finishes, I kind of chuckle because I'm like, oh my God, it's so crazy that this works, but it's just so simple that even I am like, this can't be real, but it totally is. But it's because, again, I take it for granted. It's just all this information in my brain. So I took what I learned over 20 years and I put it into this really, really effective, efficient package And it does three things. One is it helps you get the ideas out of your head. Two is it helps you to organize those ideas so that it makes sense to other people, because just because you can do doesn't mean you can teach, right? Ironically, most people who come through my program are experienced workshop runners. They have done workshops online and in person. Some of them are curriculum developers by trade, and they still come and take my program because they like the quickness and the efficiency of it. They want the framework. And I get the best feedback from industry experts who say, this is bang on. This is exactly what I needed. Now they have the framework and they can create new stuff very quickly. So that's the second thing, is to sort of organize the ideas. The third thing is we tackle the tech, which if you talk to anyone who's talking about an online course, they're either talking about time, they don't have it, or they don't know which platform they should use. And those two things will prevent them from creating an online course for months or years. So that's one thing that I do. The other thing that I do is a done for you solution, which is what I've been doing behind the scenes through my whole life, my whole entire adult life, taking it for granted, no big deal. I finally put my stake in the ground with it and said, okay, I'm hanging a shingle, bring me your courses and I will create them for you. And I had a very quick uptake with that. So that was very good. So those packages are done for you. I call it the fully baked pie. Basically, if you have content and you want it organized and you want it uploaded to a learning management system and you don't want to have to deal with any of the technology and you don't want to have to worry about, can people learn from this? I will create all of that for you and deliver that back to you, walk you through it, teach you how to use it yourself. And then it's your basically intellectual property. I'm selling you the intellectual property, or I'm doing the research for you. You retain the copyright. That's your course to do whatever you want with. And so there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes while I'm also helping people do DIY solutions. And that's it. Just two things.
Cool. So, I mean, you make it sound simple. I mean, creating the process around it does make it seem simpler. I think that structure is a huge deal. I don't know if you're familiar, but Vern Harnish, I was reading through Scaling Up the fourth time, I think, before I saw and actually understood the little snippet that he put in there that was, routine will set you free. And, but I that's my brain, right? The first three times through it didn't make any sense to me. So but then the fourth time it clicked and it was like, oh, and the whole point is that you make these decisions, you create the process, and then you get to make new decisions. You don't have to keep repeating over and over and figuring it out over and over. So that's another awesome one. So, you know, you've structured this, organized this, but still there are all the challenges of running a business. So one of the big challenges I run into with folks all the time is time management, prioritization, that type of thing. So what advice or tips do you have for business owners out there who are kind of struggling with, not having enough time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get asked to talk about time management all the time. And I laugh at it because I don't think you can manage time. Like my coach's heart is like, you're asking the wrong question, right?
Right.
Ironically, it's asking of questions. That's what slows you down. When we're trying to explore opportunities, we're trying to explore options. It's options that keeps us stuck. And so my approach, and the reason I can promise speed and I guarantee results, is that I don't leave you to ask questions. The whole thing about time management is, if you know the next right step, you can take it. If you don't know the next right step, you're left asking questions. When you're left asking questions, you're looking for answers instead of taking action. So my advice is always have a bias towards action and build that action in the foundation of being curious, right? So rather than ask the question first, doing things will bring up answers automatically. You will automatically understand if you don't have the right information because you're not getting where you want to go. Whereas if you sit around and wonder, do I have the right information? In your brain, it plays out perfectly all the time. But when you're acting it out, you'll hit a natural roadblock. And what I say to people is, when you hit a natural roadblock, that's how you know what the next right step is you only have to get over that roadblock. What we do is we tend to think of 10 roadblocks down the road while we're sitting in our asses on the couch. We haven't done anything yet. So my advice is always action towards bias, and you will learn through doing. We like to think, I see this a lot. I work strictly with industry experts, subject matter experts. You have to know. I don't know if you curse on your podcast, or do you guys curse? I can play it clean.
It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, okay. I have a potty mouth. So basically what I was going to say is you have to know your shit to be able to create a course quickly, right? So when people come to me and they say, I'm just starting out, I say, thank you very much for your interest. Here is a list of resources that you can go to get free help right now to build that business. Come back to me a year from now, because I'm not wading through the mud with you. I'm 5 years ahead of you. What I know is no good to you at this point, right? You have to sort of go through that yourself. And so I think from time management perspective, the quicker you can do, the quicker you learn. Like I said, I spent $30,000. It took me no time to realize I'd made a terrible mistake, and it was time to go in a different direction. So, and I was sick to my stomach about that at the time, but I'm a learner. So I realized like there's a ton of learning to be had from spending that money, just grasping at straws. Where is it? Where's the learning? Where's the lesson, right? But if you're sitting on the couch thinking about it, or you're worried about what might happen, it's all the bad stuff that comes up. And I really believe that there is no mistake that can't be undone, especially when it comes to business. It's sort of par for the course, right? And I know that sounds really cliche and cheesy, but it's cliche and cheesy because everyone says it, because it's true. Right. You have to fall down, you have to make mistakes, and you just can't do that if all you're doing is planning and thinking. That is not where the mistakes are made. So you save time. The irony is, I think you save more time by getting up and doing and making those mistakes than thinking about the perfect execution. And I think for me, what I tell people all the time is, as soon as you have any bit of information you can make, sort of go in a direction with or take action with, do it. You don't need all the information, because as I said, the rest of it will reveal itself, right? Like my husband and I right now, we're trying to install a fireplace, and we have no idea how to install this fireplace. So we knew we had to build a wall to put the fireplace in. And so we know enough to put a couple of 2x4s together, right? We're not handy like that, but we love to try this stuff. So we're willing to spend the money to get it wrong before we call someone up. And then, as I said to you last week, be at the mercy of someone in the trades to come, 3 weeks we wait, and they come or they don't. But we're building this fireplace. And so we know you have to build some kind of foundation. There has to be some kind of box for the fireplace to sit on. So we build the first box. Now we have this box and we're looking at it going, that's a really good foundation. It could be a ladder, it could be a bookshelf, it could be anything. And then we put the fireplace on top of it and we look at it and go, okay, we need a box on this side and we need a box on this side to close it in. Mm-hmm. So then we build a box on this side and we build a box on this side. And then the next obvious step, we're looking at it going, all right, we need another one of these boxes on the bottom. We have to build a mirror image of that for the top. So we did that. Had no idea how to build this fireplace surround. We still have no idea I've never tiled. I don't know anything about grout, but I bought that friggin' stuff because I was like, it can't be that hard. There's instructions on the side of the box how to do it. I bought a tile cutter. I bought the grout. I don't even know what it's called, but I'm standing in the aisle at Home Depot going, I don't have a clue how to do this, but everyone does it all the time. So it's not
there's a way.
There is a way. It's not that I never think it can't be that hard, right? I'm looking at this fireplace going, yeah, it's probably going to be hard. Yeah, like this is going to be, but if we break it down into chunks, step one, build that first box, build those side boxes. Let's build the top box. We're struggling with the mantle right now, but we got one hell of a foundation built and that fireplace fits. So I think when we approach projects like that, when you think about creating an online course, you're thinking about the finished result, and that's incredibly overwhelming. What I do and what I do very well is I say on day one, let's do these 4 things. That's it. Go have a beer, go relax, go watch the game. You're done for today. We only built one box. That was day 1. We built a box. On day 2, we built the second boxes. On day 3, we built the third box. Because you got to walk away from this stuff. We also think it has to happen very quickly. And for some people, 30 days is not quick enough to build an online course, but I think it's just enough time that you don't drive yourself up the wall. You can commit to 30 days to get something done, and you see enough results along the way that you get really excited about what you're building, right? I don't know if that fireplace is going to catch on fire or what, but I'm very excited about I've built this box, right? So it's a very simple example of how I want a fireplace. I'm very overwhelmed by it. I don't want to have to rely on someone else to come and do it for me. How can I do it? But now I know how to do that. So I could essentially take that and I could apply it to, I could build a window, right? It's the same thing. How do you structure a window? You build a box around it to support it. It's the same thing. So what I'm all about is taking what you know and giving you a framework so that you can execute on it very quickly. Because when you know a lot, you get overwhelmed by your own information. And we all know way more than we give ourselves credit for.
Right.
And I think our own intelligence is very overwhelming. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean, when you're generous, when you're a teacher, when you want to share, when you want to create an online course, or you want to run a business and with the goal of sharing or changing the world or making an impact, the question is always, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? And those two questions will hold people up for a really long time. So that's why I said at the outset, clarity will always, it will bring people to where you are. You can charge a lot of money for it, but more importantly, I think it allows you to have confidence in what you're doing enough that there can be versions of it, variations of it. You can try, you can fail, because you have that subject matter expertise behind you. So I think, yeah, I mean, I could go on about it all day, and I think I've gone off on a tangent here, but I think for business, it's important that the confidence comes from your subject matter expertise. Business can be learned as you go.
Well, yeah, and the thing that you're bringing up too is that when you figured out a process, or in Canada, process, right? For I have Canadian clients too.
I call it a framework. Yeah,
yeah.
Leave out all of the questionable vowels.
but you've created this process for people to follow, so they're able to bring their creativity, innovation, and stuff to it with a step-by-step guide on something that's, go down the path that I've been down. This is one thing I do with business owners. Like there are steps, there is structure.
Yeah.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel, solve these problems, put it in place, and then go forth and make new mistakes. Right. Yeah. You don't have to repeat the same ones. Be creative, do new stuff, and then we can all learn from that too. But if you're just repeating the same mistakes, falling down the same places other people have before you, then that's kind of a waste of time as well.
But there's something addicting about it, right? Like I mentioned, I've had lots of different businesses, and I can tell you exactly where I stopped every single time, because you get to a point, right, where, it's hard now. And if you don't like hard things, you don't do it.
Sure. So, well, if you're not in love with why you're doing that thing, then
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because it will be hard. I think pretty much everybody listening to this will relate to that. It gets hard. So you've got to love what you're doing. Cool. So on that note, this is another thing I think a lot of owners we think we're isolated. We think we're all alone in a lot of cases, especially when we're facing, the next obstacle, the next challenge. But everybody I talk to, and you alluded to this earlier with coaching, and I do want to make a disclaimer, my clients aren't a bunch of whiny people. But that's one of the but that's one of the advantages of doing that. You can select and guide people to other resources and places they should be if that's what they need. And find fit. So that's actually one of the things I really enjoy.
That's very important. I can attest to that 100%. Yeah.
Huge. It's huge for everybody's success, right?
Absolutely.
But anyway, so we're running into these obstacles, these challenges, and feeling like we're the only ones. I see behind the scenes, I see everybody's dealing with it. I'm dealing with different challenges. What are you running into now that you're kind of working on and trying to overcome?
I think for me right now, personally and professionally are really sort of finding their way to each other, where I'm much more impacted by what's going on in the world than I thought I was. I would 100% have told you a year ago that the pandemic, it has only just reached my area. We're just sort of seeing our first wave now. So we've been watching the pandemic happening on TV like a movie. And it hasn't I don't know anyone personally affected by it other than people can't go to work or their kids are home from school. So we've been sort of adjacent to the pandemic. What I've realized in the last sort of maybe 2 months as it's come about in my area is that I have been all along very impacted from a mental health perspective, wearing that fear, wearing that stress, trying to keep my cool. And I realized I actually use my business as a coping mechanism. So when I can't deal with what's going on personally, I dive very hard into my business. When my business wasn't doing very well at the height of not even the height, I don't even think we're at the height of COVID yet, but I think at the start of COVID, when that started, when my business wasn't doing well, I sort of flatlined a little bit because I couldn't deal personally and I had nothing to really focus on professionally. And so that was really hard for me. And then you get into a routine for sure. I found my stride. I found my groove over the summer, came back very strong in the fall. Have had a great year. 2021 is just blowing all my expectations out of the water. I think timing has a lot to do with it in my industry, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
But you know, your skills and your talents do speak for themselves. But I think timing, place, right time does matter in these instances as well. But I think right now I'm seeing it come again because now I'm in that place again where my kid is home from school again. You know, I don't know if my husband is going to continue working. He lost his job last year. I think the biggest challenge for me, like I said, is when those two worlds collide. I do not believe in work-life balance. I don't even try to have it because I love working so much that in 5 years, I've really only taken 1 week of true vacation. I travel with my laptop. I did 9 weeks of travel in 2019. I was on the road for 9 weeks and I had my laptop with me every week except for one. And I loved it, but that burns you out too. And I think it wasn't until I stopped doing that and I was forced to slow down. I bought a desktop, so I'm in an office now. I'm not at the kitchen table trying to eat and work. I think I really, really understood how affected I was, and I wasn't understanding it because I was pouring my heart into my business and my business wasn't going anywhere. I think the thing that has come out of that challenge is I have realized the importance of slowing down to speed up. It is vital. Especially when things are not going the way that you want them to or the way that you expect them to, you have to put a pin in things sometimes and give yourself a minute to breathe and reassess. And so as someone who has a bias towards action, that was very hard for me to say, I just need a minute. I have to make some decisions at this point and trust that I was doing the best I could with what I had. And now as I reflect on the last sort of 7 or 8 months, to your point earlier, my why became very clear. It became very clear why I was investing in my business, even when it wasn't working. Why was I doing that? Why was I feeling stressed? Why was I feeling overwhelmed? And the answer that I came up with was because I'm a control freak. I work in an industry where I have all the power, right? When people hire me to work for them, they don't understand really what I'm doing. And I've always positioned myself in an industry or in a job where my egomaniac, brain was saying like, you need me more than I need you. So I think there's a little bit of trauma there. So slowing down to speed up, really understanding your why, and really thinking about the importance of the decisions you're making are good things that came out of the challenges I've been facing. And so, like I said, now I see it happening again. Now I'm better prepared for it. I understand I need structure in my day. I have to make sure I do things with my family, or I have time to focus on the things that I want. And the other thing that I'll say about that, and this sort of goes back to that time management piece, is that for women especially, we're told all the time, fill your cup, right? You're familiar with this saying? People say self-care. Yeah.
Right.
So there's this saying that people say, they say, fill your cup. And so I've been doing some research around this. And what I realize is it's a thing people say to women in particular. We need you to have a full cup, hon, so you could pour it out and give it to everybody else, right? So we push women women entrepreneurs, moms, all this, whatever the titles are, we encourage them to fill their cups, but it's a selfish encouragement.
So that they can then give to other people.
Yeah, I need you to be 100%. I need you to be on so I can take from you. So one of the things that I had prepared for this speech that I was going to give, but that got canceled because of COVID, I had this whole thing planned out, and I was like, I'm going up there with a couple of shot glasses and a bottle of tequila and a 10-gallon bucket. And I'm going to ask people to try to fill this goddamn bucket, because you just can't, right? But if you got a couple of shot glasses, that is much more manageable. And so I think from the time management, the challenge piece, one of the reasons I've been able to get back on my feet so quickly, find my stride, find the success I've been looking for, and then make that impact, is because I basically am drinking from shot glasses now. I'm not trying to fill this 10-liter bucket anymore. 5 years ago, I was trying to check all the boxes. I was trying to fill that 10-liter bucket, right? And now I'm like, I have family, I have friends, I have my work, I exercise, I eat well, I read, I hike, I like to travel, and like I scrapbook, but like don't tell anyone. And like that's it. That's it. If you were to find me at any given moment of the day, I'm doing like one of those 7 things. I used to be all over the place trying to do everything. And so clarity, again, really allows you to be doing what you want to be doing when you want to be doing it. And it's much easier to shoot tequila than it is to drink from a bucket. It's just too much. It's too much.
Well, but I love that you had 2 shot glasses, because now one's for you and one's for somebody else.
Yeah, here, we'll share. Like, have you ever tried to lift a bucket full of water? It's impossible. But I was trying to just think of like, what is the visualization? If you look at, and I'm saying women, but it's because it was for a group of women, but men is too. I have just ridiculous expectations of my husband. Like, I look at him every day and I'm like, I don't know why you're still here. Because if the roles were reversed, if you talk to me like that, like we would be divorced 10 years ago. But I think there's that sense that business owners, and however you identify, male, female, anything in between, there is a sense of, if you're going to do this, you better not drop these other balls. You better not neglect the family. You better not let the bank run dry. You better not skip your healthy meals. You better make sure you can go to the PTA meeting. And I just, a few years ago, threw my hands in the air and said, I don't have to clean that kitchen. It doesn't have to be me. I don't have to get the groceries all the time. I have things I also want to do. And I think that the sort of making a routine out of it, getting into a stride, making sure the expectations are very clear, helps you when the challenges come, because you have a plan in place for that. And it all just goes sideways all the time anyway, but you have that confidence of, at least at the outset, you know what the next right step is. And I think that is very, very important.
Well, with your husband, you at least tell him what you expect, right?
Oh God, yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, well, I don't think he's a mind reader in even the slightest sense. No.
that was something that took me years to figure out. It's a kind of an embarrassing story, but my wife and I were together for 6 years before we got married, and I think it took another 2 years of marriage before I realized, and that what I said to her, I realized I wasn't a mind reader, and I turned, to her one day and just said, hey, if you will tell me what you expect and not just get mad at me, then at least I can choose whether or not I'm going to piss you off.
Right.
And
there's power in that.
Well, yeah. And it reset. And she then, there were things that she thought were very obvious and simple that I just didn't know. And, that would have saved us a lot of time and angst. But the other thing, the really embarrassing part, was it took 2 more years before I figured out I was being that guy at work.
Oh, I was just going to say, a really great question to ask is, do you want advice or do you want me to listen? And I think that applies sort of across the board, because coaches, especially, I know as much as I complain about people whining, I want to help, right? So there is a sense of like, if I can get in there and fix it, I'm just going to get in there and fix it. And so one of the things that I really had to sort of swallow my pride about was that, again, back to this, I'm very independent. I'm kind of a control freak. And he said to me one day, he was like, you're just not letting me. Like, you're getting mad because I'm not doing it, but you're not even letting me do it. Right. Like, oh, I can back off. All right. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now I let him do everything.
but those right, but those very, I mean, I guess being self-aware and thinking about those things in a work environment, especially when you're the boss and people are a little bit more reticent to give you feedback, unsolicited feedback. And by the way, I'm almost 25 years into marriage and next month. And yeah, if you're not married, there's nothing like 25 years of unsolicited feedback to improve your self-awareness.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I've been married 15 years now. I've been with my husband 20. And I look back and I'm like, you're like 20-year-old Heather's choice. Like, what is going on here? Like, no. And I say that to him and he's like, well, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I'm not sure, but it's a self-awareness thing but we have conversations like that. We're very frank with each other. And the thing that I appreciate about him, and I think that this is something, if you're a business owner, people look for this, is that, obviously you want support, obviously you want understanding, but what you really want is the freedom to mess up. You want, as a business owner, to not turn around and look at your spouse and go, oh my God, I dropped the ball really hard. And I remember when I was spending that money, just ridiculous amounts of money for me to spend on my business, because I had bootstrapped it for 4 years. I hadn't spent a dime on marketing. I had done all free content marketing myself. So for me to take that money, I was in a very, very bad pickle to start betting on money to fix my problems, which I think money doesn't always fix your problems. But I did it. And I remember it was like, I didn't tell him because I was worried about what is the fallout of that. When I realized there was a major fallout beyond the money spent, that was when I sat down and I said, look, I did this thing and I don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't think it was worth it, but I'm stuck paying it now. I have integrity. It was important to me that I didn't try to get my money back or rip them off in any way. I signed a contract, so I was following it through, and I tried to get as much as I could out of it. But, he said to me, like, if you don't try, you don't know. You just won't know. And that's the thing he always says. He has no desire to be an entrepreneur. He has no idea why I even love this so much. He does nothing but support me all the time. And then I'm over here yelling about the dishes. But I think the biggest thing is we're asking for love. We're asking for support. We're asking for understanding, but we're really asking for permission to mess up and to be very, very wrong about ourselves, our skills, our assumptions, the money we think we're going to make, and to be able to turn around and say, like, okay, what's next? And to have them say, yeah, what's next? What else is there, So, we laugh and joke, and I certainly, I'd be the first to complain about him all the time, but I literally couldn't do any of it without him, because you need that confidence. You need that confidence to be coming from that other half of you. And I just think for a lot of years I was hesitant because what is he going to think, So like, I'm a total feminist, but I'm also a very happily married woman. And I think that to disappoint in that way would be a lot harder than the failure itself. I think that's something that people don't talk about enough. Women were, you got to be everything. You got to be strong, you got to be independent, but you got to be loving, and you got to be supportive. Like, you can't do it all. And so we shouldn't expect our spouses to do it all either. But that is really the thing, I think, is you want to be able to make mistakes and not get a "I told you so" at the end of the day. Yeah.
No, that's huge. And you're making me, that's probably one of the biggest keys to my marriage as well, is just the support I get from Kathy, and they're going to be mistakes, right? They're going to be some big ones. And still having that other person believe in you, when you're at your lowest point, that's a big deal too. So thanks for sharing that. That's huge.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, is there something that you've learned recently, you kind of discovered recently, that you wish you had known, back 5-10 years ago before you embarked on this journey?
Yes. Oh God, so much, but definitely. And I say so much because the clarity and the decision-making I have now is exactly what I needed all along. And I would say every step of my career, if I had the confidence in myself 10 years ago, I would be living a very different life than I am now. But from a business perspective, financially, from a business perspective, the biggest thing I learned is that working as a freelancer, and this is going to sound just so juvenile to anybody who's been in business for any amount of time. But I didn't know, nobody told me, and I didn't know the rules around taxes and HST and collecting and receiving and all that stuff. And so you run your business, you get paid, and you're like, oh my God, this is so much money. And then you run out and you spend it. You don't bank any of it. You don't save any of it for the government. And then tax time comes and you get a $12,000 tax bill and you're devastated, even though you should be super excited because you made enough money to have to pay taxes. And you're like, well, where am I going to find $12,000? This is crazy, right? So when I relaunched my business this time, the very first thing I did was I called the bank and I said, I want to set up 7 bank accounts. And I got this from Mike McAllowitz, Profit
Right.
First. You're familiar? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. I
Yeah.
find it a little bit complicated. I give a simpler version, but yeah.
Yeah. I have read that book 3 times. And it was the 3rd time that I went, oh, I'm just going to call the bank. And like, surely they will know what it is I'm talking about. No, they had no idea. So I called the bank and I said, I want to set up 7 bank accounts. And it was going to be like $300 worth of banking fees every month.
Right.
But in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going to make a ton of money. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to invest in this, blah, blah, blah. And so then when I called the bank and they said, well, this is how much money it is. Then they told me I couldn't do that. It didn't matter how much money I was willing to pay every month. They wouldn't set that up for me. So then I called another bank. And this young woman heard me out. I brought the book to her and like showed her what I wanted to do. And she sat with me for 2 hours. She had never done it before. And she set up all these accounts for me. I got them for free. I had to pay for 1 and I got the other 6 for free. And I set it up. And I swear to you, the first dollar I made, which was attached to many other dollars, but the very first dollar I made, I took it and I went 2%, 49%, 22%, and I divided it up. And that system, if I had done that 5 years ago, I would have been a baller. Like, it was just like the money, the cash flow that created. I tell everyone, go to the bank. I refer them now to my banker and just say, ask for Vanessa, tell them I sent you. And now she sends me emails and she's like, oh my God, I got another one. Just stop sending me to people. But the reason that I love this so much and it is such a huge lesson is because, again, the clarity, that's the theme here. When all your money's in one bank account, it looks like you have a lot of money. And I definitely used to look at my bank account and say, oh my God, I have all this money. And I would do whatever I wanted with it. But then I wasn't getting my taxes sorted out. I had no savings. I had no money. There's a reason I was doing content marketing for myself, because I had no money to invest, So I wear that like a badge of honor. Like, I didn't spend any money in my business, but it's because I had no money to spend on my business. I was just spending it. I was going to Vegas and going to Florida, and, like, just spending it on travel, right? Like, I was living the life. And then I got a tax bill and was like, oh, this is real life. And I'm an adult and I should probably pay my taxes. So this year I said, to hell with that. And I set it all up. And it's the power in looking at that bank account, whether there's $1 in it or there's $10,000 in it, and knowing
where it's supposed to go,
but also the freedom it gives me to make decisions.
Yeah.
It's a very quick process of you. And I open up my bank account app now, and there are 7 bank accounts there, and it looks ridiculous and they're all labeled strange things. But you look at it, you go, I have money to sponsor that. I have money to buy those supplies. I can pay myself. I never took a salary in 5 years, not once. And I started taking a salary when I set up that system. And now I've gotten regular paychecks in my own business. Imagine paying myself. I took regular paychecks for the last 4 months and have just been like, this is incredible. Like, so simple, but nobody wants to talk about money. Nobody wants to think about money. Nobody wants to pretend it exists, but we all want to make it somehow. And so I think the foundational piece is, one of the requirements to work with me actually is you have to have revenue. You have to have recurring revenue. You have to have money that you could bet on, and you have to have people to sell your course to. So if you're scrambling to pay for my program, you're not going to get in my program, because that's not where you need to be. You need to be focusing on building that foundation with that money. So I think that is the biggest thing, is get your books in order. You don't need a fancy accounting system. You don't need a fancy accountant. If you can do a lot of that stuff yourself, but you need a way to see your money in real time every day, so that when you're out and you go, oh, I'd love to buy that clock for my office. Do I have money to buy it? The answer is either yes or no. And that's it. There's no negotiation. You just have the answer. It's yes or no. And then you move on. So I think that's the thing I would definitely say. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So you brought up Profit First as a favorite book. Are there any other books or articles, things that you're reading or looking at now that you would like to share?
Yeah. So I'm an avid reader. I at one time was reading a book a week, and then I got away from that a little bit because it was started to be very repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And, you start to absorb a lot of the same things. My favorite book is actually The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I read that book at a time when I really needed it in my life. And it really helped me to sort of get back on board and keep going when things were getting pretty hard in my business. I really like that one. I am a huge fan of Amanda Lang. She's a Canadian author and correspondent with, she's done Bloomberg. I think she's worked for CNN. She's done CBC, CTV National. She's amazing. She has written a book called The Beauty of Hard. And that is a really cool book where when you're feeling really bad about yourself, you pick up this book and you can open it up to any chapter. It's just a bunch of short stories about people who have it way harder than you do right now. And it's just a good book for perspective. Yeah, I think it's called The Beauty of Hard. Yeah. Discomfort, The Beauty of Discomfort. Sorry. I really love that book, and I gave that book to a friend and lent it to her, and she never gave it back to me, which just kills me because I'm a book hoarder. That's a big one. I'm currently reading Jerry Seinfeld's Is This Anything? And it's nice and light, and I needed the change. I get really deep into business books and just become consumed with them. So I went in a different direction this time. So if you're looking for something funny, I would highly recommend Jerry Seinfeld's new book.
Cool. I love it. Thank you for the recommendations.
Yes.
Any other thoughts you want to leave us with before we wind down?
Yeah, I think, I could talk all day, obviously. I just want to say thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I like your questions that you asked and digging into, where are the lessons here? Like, I appreciate that because that is definitely in my wheelhouse. I love to look at what are the takeaways here and why are we even doing this? But I guess what I'd like to leave people with is and without sounding very grim, I always try to preface this because I like to say this to people. I think it's important to remember that if you're sitting on the fence and you're worried about what's going to happen and you're not making decisions in your business or you're not getting into business for whatever reason, I always say to people, like, you might wake up dead tomorrow and it's not going to get any worse than that. So why not try, right? Why not try? And it's a bit of what do they call it? Toxic positivity. But that's sort of a mantra that I have is like, think big, move fast. Cause like this life goes by like that, right? It really is. And I'm very practical and I'm very tactical, but I'm very aware of time and how we spend it and waste it. And I think that if you think about it, the worst that could happen is you're going to wake up dead tomorrow. Then everything else, in the vein of Amanda Lang, everything else, it just pales in comparison. So as bad as you think it's going to be, I can promise you it's probably going to be worse, but it's worth trying. Like it is going to be all those things that you think are going to happen. They are definitely going to happen in business, especially. But I think it's worth trying just to say that you did it. And I think you'll surprise yourself by your own capabilities, your own capacities, and your ability to figure it out as you go. I think we all have it in us. And I think those who choose to stick it out and ride that wave are glad that they did every single time. So I would highly recommend entrepreneurship to anyone thinking about it, on the fence about it. Get into it and get into it fast.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure for sure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.